everyone, and welcome at the Sacred Vision Record podcast, episode 2. Today is a special day because I have a guest which I was really looking forward to interview, and really I wanted to go deeper in the concept of the sacred, in the concept of masculine and feminine energy, and also see this point of view in a more esoteric way. And I couldn't find a better guest, honestly, here in Australia. Every time I read a post of this guy, is an instant enlightenment, and the power of wisdom that this guy have is unbelievable. I mean, the value that you have just reading a post is insane. So I'm very grateful and honored to welcome Igor Vasilevitsky.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate you seeing that, validating that, and acknowledging that, really. And, as I said it from the very beginning when you sent me the text message, and I'm like, man, this guy is coming from a good place, very kind heart and very beautiful intentions, and obviously done a lot of work. So respect for your work, respect for you, respect for your growth, and thanks for having me on.
I really would like to ask you how you made this transition from the IT corporate to the world of healing. And I'm very curious to know how was actually that process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So IT was the natural kind of movement for a person, who grew up in a culture that was very heavily conditioned around success and achievement and finances and credibility and that sort of thing, and status. So at the time, that was IT. So I kind of went and did that. And within 5 years of doing that and kind of traveling around the world and working in different parts of the world, I was miserable. So I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do? And the only thing that kind of really drew me was two things: was kind of travel, like backpacking, and something about healing, but I had no idea what. Something about, let me say, spirituality, probably more so. Which was a deeper calling, but I had no idea what that was or what that meant. I just knew that whenever I came across something that was, talking about those things, those deeper things, I was immediately drawn or lit up from within. So I kind of followed the rabbit down the burrow, and I traveled. I went to South America. I went to Asia, which was kind of the popular thing to do at the time anyway. And had all sorts of different experiences, began to deepen within myself, and found that I was reasonably good at connecting to and helping others do similar things, which, it was, I guess, an organic next step to move into studying some of this stuff. And it's very much just a combination of things that I've discovered within myself and the modalities that I've studied. Something that's deepening uniquely. I'd like to say uniquely without sounding too egoic about it, but something that does feel like it's coming through me is this kind of combination or linking between the therapeutic space and the sacred space. And that's what I'm really passionate about. I'm writing my book about it, and the posts that you mentioned that tend to land for you and others it lands in that kind of deep place, you know, and I get very beautiful feedback from people, a lot of love coming back at me, because I think I'm touching something, you know, within people. And I try to, I do weave that into my healing practice. You know, I work with a lot around the reconnection to the sacred. So working therapeutically, psychotherapeutically, energetically, but very much about also grounding into the sacred dimension, into the blueprints, the archetypes, initiating or activating or facilitating rites of passages for people's awakening from that place, from those blueprints, because they ultimately they have within them all the necessary information for our psychospiritual health.
So you are someone basically that wants to facilitate the healing from your clients. Actually, you want to help your clients to find the healing within themselves.
Not always. A lot of the time, yes. You know, a lot of the times I'm simply, you know, I might be holding, let's say, a mentor energy, an elder energy, a caretaker energy, right? For a person's inner child that missed the activation or the rites of passage when they needed a mentor or a caretaker that cared or was present, you know, or a masculine, healthy figure to protect at a certain point where there was vulnerability. So I need to hold that, and then the energetic kind of interplay, the dynamic, is that part within them, that vulnerable part within them, is able to receive, you know, through me and through our dynamic, what they need. That becomes a rite of passage. That becomes an activation, an initiation. So at times it's that, you know, at other times it just depends. It so depends on the individual person. Some people come to me and I'm like, oh, I'd love to work on helping, you know, you, Alex, let's say, activate more of your magician or something like that, you know, something deeper and archetypal. But you may be asking me, you know what, I don't want to go that deep. I just want to help with strategy around my business, or I have a limiting belief on the intellectual plane. So let's access that, in which case quite often I do have a psychic capacity to be able to tap into different bodies. So the emotional body, the psychological body, and the spiritual bodies. So, you know, and then at other times it's about facilitating an emotionally healing experience, guiding the other person to bring certain resources in. It's so varied. And this is what I love about healing. It's so artistic. It's so creative.
Wow.
And I'm passionate about it because it's like every client, every session is uniquely different. You know, everything that I know, I need to put to the side with every person, even when I see them repeatedly, because something new presents. And yeah, it's, you know, and I learn on the fly. It's like I'll get something, I'll channel something, or I'll intuit something, or I feel something that's completely new, and I'll say it to the person, and him and I, or her and I, are equally astounded or surprised by some truth that needs to be expressed or articulated. That's incredibly healing, but I didn't even know it before. So it's exciting.
And what is actually, from your experience, the biggest wounding between men and women in relationship?
I don't think I can put like biggest or smallest as such. But let me answer that in a different way. I think what in my experience and in my understanding, I think that one of the biggest, if not the biggest, misconceptions or misunderstandings is that, you know, we can just work on, let's say, a relational level, or a psychological relational level or an emotional relational level without tapping into the sacred level. So you can maybe coach a couple to act differently at certain points with each other, or manage their emotions better without dumping it on their partner. But ultimately, for me, it goes all the way into the sacred space where the masculine and the feminine energies are always playing out on some level. Whether they're playing out healthily, cleanly, or neurotically is really up to us to connect that deeply. Because let's say a woman that plays the game of being chased, let's say, I've just written about that today, and she continues to play, let's say, hard to get. Now, if we look at it strictly from a psychotherapeutic, psychological, or even emotional, let's say, attachment trauma styles level, first of all, we can pathologize that behavior very easily. We can work on those levels to try to remedy it. The symptoms, the underlying core wounds, through that lens. But what if we include this sacred dimensionality into it? The feminine from a sacred dimension, on that level, within all of us, within men and women, desires to be pursued by the masculine. It's, it's as archetypal as it is cultural. Look at the archetypal, the stereotypical woman that flirts. She hints, she implies. He acts and he's implicit. She waves her fan and bats her eyelids, and he takes the cue and he acts, he pursues. So if we take the sacred dimension into it, instead of pathologizing it, what if we saw it as the woman, or man, doesn't matter, because the feminine's the feminine, the masculine's the masculine, in playing hard to get or in desiring to be chased or acting that out? What if she's needing deeply to experience being so deeply devoted to by the masculine that he's prepared to go after them? And what if we then bring that into a relationship, as I do with couples? Sacred intimacy is something that I am very passionate about, and I see lots of couples. Then, instead of pathologizing that or trying to remedy it or trying to look at wounds, what if we allow for the possibility that this is a healthy dynamic that just needs to be acknowledged and navigated in a different way, where they can play with this polarity? And that can lead to certain aspects of healing, something that may be neurotic, where, let's say, the woman cannot take enough of this devotion of the masculine in and continues to do that behavior. There's often wounding or distrust of the masculine to allow him to do that, to allow to be pursued. Because some women want it, desire it, but cannot allow that in. So when we hold the framework of healing in a sacred context, in a sacred dimension, I think there's a lot more, there's a lot more magic to it too. Because magic exists in the sacred plane. Magic exists in the plane of mythology. Magic exists in the dance between the masculine and the feminine. If you look at every fable or religious texts, it's about the knight romancing the maiden or the king conquering the queen. All these dynamics are at play within our psyche on a deep enough level.
Yeah, what is interesting, and I really would like to know your point of view. I'm coming from Europe, specifically Italy, so, and somehow I feel that here in Australia, my relationship, I mean, the way that I see in general as well, women, is they're very distrusting men. and that there is somehow this thing of being on guard all the time. And you know what is interesting as well, that somehow people here as well wants to avoid conflicts. I feel that conflicts somehow are, if they done in the right way, they're actually somehow turning point of growth. So what actually you think about
that? I tend to totally agree. In my experience, coming from a different culture to Australia, I can see, I knew there were differences before, and I had to adjust and repress certain aspects of my cultural upbringing and develop others to fit in. I had to go through my own healing journey about integration of what my lineage is, what my cultural legacy or gifts or inheritances is a better word are, and the current cultural context that I'm in. So I can see from that, if again I'm going to speak from that sacred kind of dimensional analysis, that certain cultures give more freedom to certain archetypes. So, where you and I are from, there's a lot more passion and fire and conflict, and there's a lot more, and there's also a lot more, I find, a lot more romance and to chase and to pursue and to dramatize and to, sing underneath a balcony with the woman there and seduce her and romance her and court her. There are certain elements of that is, I would say, predominantly a lot more dominant in our cultural context, as opposed to, Australia or other Anglo-Saxon cultures, where that sort of behavior can be pegged as stalking sometimes, So, then I see couples who come to me, and they may struggle, sometimes they're cross-cultural. One person may be from a cultural context where there is more fire and passion, let's say, allowed. And then you have more Anglo-Saxon partner who doesn't quite understand how to access that place, how to meet those needs. And sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's just two, let's say, Anglo-Saxon Australians. But they're fantastic maybe on a practical level, emotional level, child rearing level, but there's something missing, a deeper sense of polarization between their masculine and feminine dynamic. And quite often it's found in that sacred archetypal plane of activating, helping them access and activate those romantic aspects which are in all of us, the knight and the maiden, the knight courting the maiden, that aspect within the man wanting or desiring to court that in the woman. And there's romance and there's magic in that. There's juice in that. There's fire in that. There's passion in that. Rather than having everything equal and practical and pragmatic. Because if that works, great. But a lot of people will struggle with not having that other dimension there.
When you talk about, for instance, the sacred, do you think actually there is a connection between the sacred and the unknown?
Yes, I do. Now, this is the interesting thing, and this is what a lot of my posts talk about. There's this duality going on. So on a more, let's call it more human, more 3D, more dense, more relational, egoic, let's say, perspective, there is this hang-up that people have. I can't decide, I don't know, and I need to work it out. And I'm so uncomfortable in the uncertainty and fear. Now, when I can help someone like that access deeper within themselves, this dimension of the sacred, then the unknown is simply an aspect of the divine, of consciousness. The human mind can't grasp everything with certainty. And as children, we know this. Children live in the sacred and the mythological a lot, right? They are in wonder. Wonder is a state of like, oh my God, wow, I don't know, and I'm amazed. Like awe, wonder, and awe and amazement. They don't have certainty. They have just this magic of being agape at something, like, wow. But there's comfort in that, right? There's a surrender in that. There's an okayness in that. There's no need to clarify, quantify, concretize into a knowing until our culture or our adults say that, yeah, it's necessary to know everything and work it out mentally. There is a need to drop deeper into that sacred space of the unknown, and therefore into surrender and into awe and wonder and the mystery, the great mystery. You know, we've lost touch with mystery, living in the mystery. And that's a very sacred activation. So when I work with people, there's a lot of this reconnection to the sacred through the portal of youth, because we all had it. And when we can have the right initiations, the right rites of passages, had we had it back then, like previous cultures had, you retain childhood attributes: innocence, play, curiosity, joy, sensitivity, vulnerability, all emotionality, those things, right? So when I'm able to meet my clients at that level, real magic is present, you know, and we can sit in awe of those experiences together when all of a sudden they drop into something deeply sacred and deeply innocent and deeply childlike in them. And it's beautiful, you know. That's the other thing I absolutely love about my work, because I get to experience that with them. I mean, I have that in myself. I've gone there too, but to do that with another, to share in the mystery and the awe and the wonder of the sacred, it's a beautiful thing. It's a very spiritually intimate thing.
What do you think about the embodiment of both females and masculine energy within oneself?
I think that yes, we have, you know, I guess a spectrum of amounts of each. I think some people in my experience are more on one side or the other. They're looking to develop or call in or activate the other polarity. But to my shock and surprise, I have met and worked with people who, sorry, just the connection unstable. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, good. I have met and worked with people who just are in a beautiful, clean, either masculine or feminine energy, you know, and not the other. And they can't bring it in because they've read it in a new age modality that we all have it, and therefore they need to develop it to balance and have an inner union of the masculine and feminine. It's true for some, and sometimes I have facilitated that in some people. But in my experience, everybody's unique and brings their own kind of composition of various energies. And this goes beyond the masculine and feminine. You know, if we want to go esoteric, and I really wasn't. I came from such an intellectual background, so evidence-based and empirical, that when I started to intuit and see and feel and experience these things within myself and within my clients, it blew my mind to what's real and what's possible. So with some clients, they may not have, let's say they're very grounded and so on, have a beautiful feminine energy. They don't have a lot of, or any, in my experience, in my attunement, masculine, but they have a very strong spiritual body, or even interdimensional bodies or galactic bodies that are supporting them and giving them certain strength and attributes which are similar to masculine, assertive, protective, powerful, warrior-like energies. So, and I know I realize that I'm going quite esoteric here and outside the framework of what most people are comfortable in the therapeutic space, but that it has been my experience.
Yeah, is insane, because I feel that we are unique. We are here with exploring the world with our own view and our own eyes. And even if there is a degree of influence from our society, I think every one of us is different. Now, I want to just dive more into what is your personal view about the new age spiritualism in Australia. What do you think about that?
I don't think I see it differently in different parts of the world. I mean, my experience of it has been kind of the same throughout. It's one type of subculture that I was deeply in, and that was my, you could say, initiation into some of this stuff. So it has a lot of amazing wisdom and value in it. But the issue is, I think, is that there's been a lot of appropriation of those spiritual ideologies into the ego. And so a lot of people will use, and most people are aware of this by now, spiritual bypassing to transcend their trauma, to gaslight others, to protect themselves and not actually do work, not actually do genuine spiritual work, but use the terminology to avoid doing the work. And it's unconscious. There's no malice there. So there's a substitute there of avoidance methodology, right? So instead of using, alcoholism, workaholism, mainstream, what you would call mainstream type of living to avoid inner growth, paradoxically, the very thing people will learn and digest as things that are talking about how to do the inner work, they will use to avoid the inner work. So I think there's a reason why a lot of these teachings were kept secret and now, have been unlocked. And so now everybody's who comes across it are very excited about it because they promise a lot. They promise peace and enlightenment and kundalini opening and chakras aligning and the transcendence of suffering. So it's very sexy to follow, tantric connection, cycling energies through each other and looking into each other's third eye as we co-join in our union in the ethereal space, And of course, there's truth to it. The question is, at what level is the consciousness that's studying it? And perhaps there's a need for more grounded psychotherapy before they begin to access some of these planes. But it's very tempting not to do the edgy work and to go into those sexy things. There's a lot to be said about it. The other thing I want to add that's just dropping in now is that anything that we don't embody, anything that is taught to us that doesn't resonate, but we begin to take on as our own filter of life. And so that is by definition indoctrination in cultism. So there is an aspect of that in everything, but included in New Age spirituality. So when I began to kind of realize that within myself, I literally began to purge it out of my nervous system. I could feel it burning out, how much I had swallowed. I mean, I was never I didn't feel like a fool. I was very discerning, but also skeptical and doubtful, which are, by the way, different things. So I kept a lot of it at bay, but I had swallowed a lot because it made me feel better about myself. And so when it did burn out of me and the spiritual identities, the spiritual egos began to burn away, I had to face a lot of fragility underneath. The fragility of my insecure, unworthy feeling, 7-year-old that had come to Australia. I was a fat Russian kid with a funny name at school. And I began to build these identities to compensate for it. So we all have to kind of go through that, I think, at some point in our life, and New Age spirituality is no different. So when I worked through that, then I could hold my spiritual knowings a lot more cleanly. They were more personal. They come from within, and what I really know and have conviction in as an embodied experience of, that I'm able to share, rather than things that I've taken on. So I don't know, I just kind of followed a tangent there. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting what you just said, because I feel that somehow, like I remember when I was a kid, and I was, grabbing books about yoga and meditation, and I was like, I'm doing meditation, I'm doing yoga, but I was like somehow using that as an excuse to not really doing some work that then I faced later on. So the archetypes of my life, I have to be honest, were my parents, and what I noticed is that until I faced the fact that my father passed away and my mother had a long-term and a degenerative disease, I was like, not really grounded into the practice, or really taking the meditation and the practice seriously, and yeah, I just wanted to share that with you, so a little bit about me as well.
Yeah, and I think there's no judgment or shame on anybody doing what I described, because we all do it. That's how we're wired. Our trauma, our conditioning, our ego, our psychic structure is wired to appropriate things for safety until we get proper, deeper, more concrete, energetic safety within our system. We need this experience. There's no shame or judgment around it. It's simply that, we need to see through the bullshit of it too. And and to realize and mature to the next level of being able to let that go, to truly deal with our stuff, to mature spiritually beneath that. We can have that deeply human experience of appropriation and live lifetimes in it. And then we can drop that and find the grounding safety within the anchoring of our being, or within our masculine, or whatever works for whoever, where there's a greater degree of self-certainty, self-safety, self-reassurance that is not garnered by appropriating something. Because when we do that, we're not only limiting ourselves, then we're judging those that are outside of it, we're shaming those that are outside of it, It's religion all over again. They're the infidels. Or in New Age spirituality, my family is so 3D, and I'm 5D. There's a lot of that happens too. There's a turning away from family and from one's ethnic culture often. So, which is classic cultism actually. And it's not diabolical, I don't believe. And there's truth in it. There's healthy truth in it. Yes, we have the chance, because we're living in a first world country, to be able to now not have to need our base core, bottom of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs around safety and security, because our parents and grandparents did that for us. But instead of judging them for not being able to meet our emotional needs, we can be grateful for them having met that, so that we can now tend to the inner world and deal with what we have inherited, which quite often is pretty full-on stuff. We're living 1 or 2 generations down, most of us, from times of war and famine. And so we have these hangovers of paranoia, terror, survival, all this sort of stuff. I've certainly had it, and a lot of clients that I work with have, where it's time to face that, or they're able to face that, or they want to face that in order to create a deeper sense of security within their personal structure and to pass that on to their children. But, there's something else that you said that I wanted to speak to that I find interesting. You spoke about your family and your parents, and you shared with me yesterday about that too. But there is this, originally, the process of rites of passage initiation for both boys and girls, within it had a process, and it's used to be also in bar mitzvahs and communion, right? So in Christianity and Judaism, and I'm not sure about Islam, but I'm sure there was too, or is, this deeper esoteric meaning of separating from your parents, but not separating from the archetypes we projected onto them. And that is why a lot of people hold on to their parents, or to what their parents say, or desire their approval, because they're actually wanting approval by the divine father or divine mother, the divine masculine, divine feminine. And so at that rites of passage, at that age, 12, 13, 7, different cultures, different ages, the spiritual ritualization of this divorcing of those archetypes from our parents that have been graciously holding them for us when we're born, to put them where they belong, up in the heavens or deep down in the sacred, and therefore disconnect from the human mom and dad and put them and have a deep connection to them in the sacred plane. And so therefore, when they do go or pass away, or we don't live with them, or we don't get along with the human father and mother, we still have a direct line of communication feeding us of the divine masculine and feminine. Because if we don't, we chase it either in them or we chase it in our lovers. We're constantly looking for that goddess woman, as it often happens in spirituality, in New Age spirituality, or a father figure to compensate for a lack of present dad or something like that, right? So to me, on a deeper cultural healing level, we really do need sacred rites of passages, because we're all wired to have health, psychological, spiritual, emotional health within our DNA. And all we need is the prayer and invocation by elders to the child's soul, their sacredness, to awaken these archetypes. And our ancestors had them to some degree. And I feel like, we would benefit a lot from that. And again, on a more microcosmic level, this is what I try to bring in when I can to my sessions.
Yeah, so now, because I want to go really to the point, like, what is actually your way of awakening the magic in your clients? Like, how is your way of awakening that energy?
I mean, a lot of the times, it's speaking to their soul, because again, it's in there. So a lot of the time it's about finding, and often intuitively, I will have the imagery or the story that they're currently playing out, and it could be the Sleeping Beauty story, where the woman or the maiden has fallen asleep within the person's sacred dimensionality. And so the woman is awaiting and sitting, waiting, and she keeps telling me the surface story of, there's just no man. The man won't come, and I'm waiting for him in my lonesome tower with my hair down. There'll be these messages that are coming through the story, through the suffering, through the pain, which are indicative of certain passages or journeys that are playing out. And so then often I have to meet that, and then I have to talk to that, or I have to complete the stories, change the story, restructure the story, get them to meet me in a certain part of the story. If we're working on the sacred, it's not always the case. Often it's about, holding them in their suffering because they've never been helped before. Or it's about being able to provide the strength and the clarity and the direct penetration of the masculine calling out some bullshit that they've been running and been defensive to. But they need to hear. And it does penetrate eventually. So, sometimes it's containment. A lot of women that will see me will be desiring the masculine energy. That's why they're drawn to me. But they'll be often asking, yearning for a specific type of masculine modeling to their system, to their nervous system, to their psyche. And if I can find it, that I can give it to them. And that can be holding, support, distance with presence. It can be an offering from me, an energetic penetration from me by simply saying something that I see in them, right? So really deeply seeing them and speaking to that and allowing them to feel safe enough to receive it deep within them. And that can be enormously powerful because it's spiritually intimate, and quite often people have never had that experience before. And then they can, the nervous system, their psyche, their soul appropriates it deep within, takes it out in the world, is able to then follow the same neurological pathways with other people. So, yeah, my methodology is so, again, dependent on to where the person is at, what they're needing, what they've come to see me about. And I tend to listen on multiple levels. Sometimes they can be telling me something from a deeply emotional place. They're very emotionally intelligent. Yet their soul may be asking for something else on the sacred. And sometimes they might be coming from a psychological level, but they're needing emotional strength. So it's really just about whether I'm able to successfully attune and offer them what they need.
What do you think actually about plant medicine and psychedelics? What's your view about that?
Yeah. I tend to kind of feel like there's a lot of this kind of romanticization and idealization of plant medicine. Again, it's kind of sexy. Oh my God, I'm seeing the reality through the matrix kind of thing, you know? Or I can accelerate my therapy by drinking ayahuasca and do what in one night what I could do in 3 years in therapy. No, I don't agree with that at all. I feel like there's a lot of spiritual bypass going on through that. I feel like there's some abuse going on through that. I'm sure there are people who are deeply called, and this is one spiritual bypass and spiritual linguistic way of doing what a lot of people just want to do for fun when they go. I feel called, or I want to honor my desire to go to Peru and sit with shamans. And I want to honor my desire to, or my need. I want to honor my need to be in an open relating space and be polyamorous, because I want to honor my need to connect with many people. There's a lot of usage of spiritual terminology, because there is such a thing as honoring what your soul is needing to experience, to justify just following desire and impulses. Right? So coming back to what you asked me about, plant medicines. In my experience, there's enough here. There's enough in our experience. Life is unfolding for us enough challenges to deal with. So we can meet that bravely and do it in a slow way, the way that life is unfolding for us, rather than trying to accelerate it, let's say, right? The people that do a lot of plant medicines and, talk about clearing traumas and this and that, and God bless if it helps them, but a lot of the relational trauma heals, I'm sure you've heard this before, in relationship. So coming back to the example before, me as a man being able to genuinely respect a woman's boundary and have her experience that in her body, or for her to trust enough to surrender deeper into her softness or tenderness while I hold an energetic distance that feels safe enough for her to do so, let's say, cannot be replicated by a peyote ceremony. You can't. Not in my experience, not in my understanding. And I could be wrong. I'm really open to being wrong, but I've also had those experiences in the past, and that is my understanding. That is my truth.
Now, I don't want to somehow, because you expressing your idea, like your the concept of boundaries, right? So, and I don't want to somehow match boundaries with psychedelics. The question is more about generally, for instance, don't you think that boundaries sometimes are an excuse for people to don't actually do the work, or to put themselves out there more and challenge themselves?
What do you mean? Can you give me an example?
Yes, somehow I feel that in both genders, sometimes the boundaries are an excuse to don't work within the challenges, but somehow put that boundaries as a way to protect, sometimes the ego as well.
It's fine. I think I understand what you're asking. I'll answer what I've understood, and if it's not what you're asking, please ask me again. So yes, the word boundaries is another one that's been totally appropriated and misappropriated from the New Age spirituality space, but also from psychological terminology space, right? So I think a lot of people will mistake, first of all, barriers for boundaries, right? So it's like, this is a boundary, you're crossing it. You're not allowed to move closer to me. And yet the person's totally unconsciously or consciously holding a resentment, which is actually about a barrier, right? To ward off any closer intimacy to their partner. But they will gaslight the partner by saying, you're crossing a boundary, right? So it takes real attunement in relationship, but as a therapist, to know and to sense, when a person is speaking, let's say I'm holding space for a couple, and they're using this terminology a lot. I have to do a lot of sifting through people who come see me, who come from the self-development kind of years of doing that. There's so much stuff they're protecting and ducking and weaving, and you got to be really onto it to call it out and get to the crux of what's actually happening. So boundaries is one of those terms that's, misused. And the other thing about boundaries is, it's a experiential thing. So if a person genuinely has a genuine boundary and they have a partner who's sensitive enough, they'll feel where the boundary is. And the other person won't have to say, this is a boundary, do not cross it, kind of thing. So this idea that we have to set boundaries, we have to tell people is, it's first of all, it's patronizing other people who are basically saying that others can't sense boundaries. And sometimes it's true, but there is a degree of patronization there, but it's also taking away the power of the person actually embodying the boundary. If I have to say it to everyone, then why would I work on actually energetically creating it within my field and therefore have it respected by those around me? So yeah, boundaries is a whole subject we could talk about.
And for instance, what actually are the programs that you offer to people, the various somehow methodology or programs that you offer to your clients?
So I offer single sessions, single one-on-one sessions with me. And then there are a couple of different containers. There's the container of like what I call a deep dive container. It's a 3-month program. It's weekly sessions with me. Now, whenever there is a container and there's a deep, energetic engagement in a container, there's a connection between me and my clients between the sessions too. So there is a journey that happens across 3 months that is outside of the individual sessions too. The deep dive container is very much about, it's really just going deeply into the guts of the healing, into the wounds, into the sacred, into whatever needs to happen that you can't get to in a single session, obviously. There are certain benefits to committing to a container because, you intend on a certain level of healing and growth for yourself. And so people who do commit to that tend to, truly experience a major change by the end of that, and usually a whole bunch of different changes. Then there is the divine masculine and divine feminine containers or programs. And I'm most excited about that. I'm sure you've noticed me talk quite a bit about the sacred and archetypes and that. So the divine masculine is for men to step into basically the best versions of themselves that they can be. So, there's a structure there on working on father issues and then activating the divine masculine, divine father. There's activation of, healing around an activation of warrior, magician, lover, king archetypes as deeply as we can go with that. And then movement into divine unions, sacred intimacy relationships with women, and purpose, connection on that sacred level to purpose, to holding that in your field, not just running around doing something. So it's quite a profound container. And then there's the same thing for divine feminine, which I'm not going to go through in as much detail, but ultimately it's about the deepest activations, the deepest levels of growth for a woman that I've been able to come up with, channel, experience, and garner from my experiences of working with women, of being in relationships, of working with my own inner feminine. So these are the programs, these are the containers that I offer.
Yeah, and last question, where actually people can find you online, where people can see your work and reach out to you?
So yeah, I've got an account on Instagram. I don't engage a hell of a lot with it, but like Facebook, more Facebook. So you can write down my impossibly sounding last name for listeners after the session, maybe in your links. And they can find me, follow me, contact me, message me. My email address, igor@holisticlifecounseling.com.au. But yeah, there are those ways of contacting me.
Thank you, Igor. Thank you so much for the incredible value that you bring here into the Sacred Vision podcast. For me, it's an honor to have you here. And honestly, guys, please follow his journey and please follow his pages, because it's incredible what he shares. And if you want also book a session with him, I think will be a great investment as well for, really go deeper within yourself and discover more what is the power of the sacred that all of us we have inside. And remember to subscribe to the channel and to press the notification bell, because we will have a lot of guests here and I'm so excited. I'm looking forward for it and have a great time. I hope really this podcast bring a lot of inspiration and also a lot of answers that perhaps you had, you wanted to have. And yeah, thank you so much for the support to all of you. I send you love and bless. Peace out. Sacred.